The laugh came late, artificial, dragging itself out of her throat like a reluctant ghost, as though it had to climb over the weight of everything unspoken between us. "We forgot our wallet," she said, brushing her hair behind one ear. Her smile so precise it looked painted on with a trembling hand. "And our cards, too." Her voice was soft, polished, a note too perfect to be real. "Oh, brother-in-law, you don't mind, do you?" she added, eyes darting like a predator testing the wind.
Us.
The waiter stood stiffly beside the table, his hand hovering, nervously as he placed the bill with the kind of careful reverence one might reserve for laying a tombstone. The number stared back at me like a punchline with no setup. 200,000, not in pesos, not in rupees, dollars. $200,000. That's what they thought I was worth. A fool's price for a man who once believed that love was a shelter. That family was a truth, that marriage was a promise rather than a performance. My wife didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She didn't look at me with guilt or confusion, no. Her gaze was steadier than ever, a silent cue that this was just another round of the same old game. She looked at me like she always did when she expected me to play along, to carry the burden of civility while they laughed behind teeth too white and too sharp to ever be trusted. Her parents laughed too sharp and brittle, like broken glass. Being stirred in a wine glass? That's when I saw it. Not the mistake, not even the betrayal, but the pattern. This wasn't a slip. It was a script. How many times had I been placed in this position, maneuvered like a pawn on a board I didn't know I was on? How many conveniently forgotten wallets? How many unpaid loans repaid in love? How many moments disguised as emergencies that ended, with me footing the bill while they toasted my generosity? I didn't react. I didn't storm out or yell. Instead, I reached for the bill, turned it over slowly, like it might whisper some hidden truth in its digits, some final confirmation of what I already knew. My hand was steady. My voice didn't waver. "No," I said. Just that. One word. But it cracked the room open like a sledgehammer. Silence followed, the kind that fills a vacuum and makes it hard to breathe. It didn't begin there, of course. These things never do. It started a month ago, maybe two. Maybe it started long before that. The first time I ignored the soft, creeping suspicion in my gut. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't come like thunder. It comes like dust, settling slowly, quietly, until one day you realize everything around you is covered in it. I had seen her phone, lying face up on the bed one morning, freshly unlocked, screen lit with a message so casual it nearly escaped. "Notice, he doesn't suspect a thing." From her sister, no name, no context. Just that single sentence sitting there like a landmine waiting to be stepped on. And I didn't step on it. I stared at it for a full minute, not out of confusion, but because I wasn't confused at all. I remembered the way her sister lingered in the kitchen when I walked in. The too smooth "hey bro" that rolled off her tongue like melted plastic. The sideways glances, the over-laughter at nothing. The way my wife watched her when she thought I wasn't looking. It was like finding out the painting you loved and dusted for years was always a forgery. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I didn't ask questions I already knew the answers to. Instead, I smiled. I nodded when she came out of the shower, her towel wrapped tight around her betrayal, and I began what needed to be done. I transferred money from our shared account quietly, without triggering alerts to a private investigator. I'd used once before when a friend was being blackmailed. Discreet, relentless, unshakable. He took the case without question. Then, I ordered the DNA test, masked as a fun ancestry kit. My daughter, my little girl, with my eyes, or so I once believed, offered her cheeks swabbed with giggles, asking if we'd find out we were descended from royalty. I nodded, told her we'd see, and then I waited. 10 days later, the pie called me. His voice was calm but heavy, like someone standing at the edge of a deep chasm. "She's not biologically yours," he said. No embellishment. No attempt at comfort. Just the truth, cold and precise. I said thank you. I hung up. And I sat there on the edge of the bed, in the same room where I once whispered dreams to my wife in the dark. And I listened to the sound of her laughter echoing down the hallway. She and her sister were in the living room, drinking wine, watching a romantic comedy. The irony was a gut punch. I opened her old phone, the one she thought was wiped. She never was good with tech. The photos were there. The messages. One video in particular burned into my retinas. Her and her sister. Lips locked, bodies pressed. Taken on the night of our engagement party, while I was outside rehearsing my proposal speech. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I documented. I cataloged. I became an archivist of betrayal. Dates, timestamps, screenshots. Every whisper turned into a file, every touch into evidence. If you're going to end something that had become this elaborate a lie, you don't just cut it down, you salt the earth. 2 days before the dinner, I placed a manila envelope on the table beside her as she painted her nails. Always red, always. Neat. What's this? She asked. Open it, I said. She did. Photos, messages, the DNA test. I watched her face shift, not panic, not sadness, strategy. She was calculating, searching for an angle. Get explained, she began, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't ask you to, I replied. That scared her more than shouting ever could. Her sister entered minutes later, saw the papers, stopped cold. No one said a word. I stood, nodded once, left the room. And now here we were, surrounded by fine china and crystal glasses, pretending. Her parents were laughing at some joke I didn't hear. Her sister had the nerve to wink at me. You'll cover us, right, big bro? She said. The gall of it made my chest burn, and still I said nothing. I let the silence swell like a wave. Then I placed the USB on the table. Inside this, I said, voice low, measured, is every lie you've ever told. Every chat, every image. And one video filmed on the night of your anniversary with him. Her father dropped his fork. Her mother went pale. My wife stared like she'd been struck. Her sister's hand shook. Also, I added, your daughter will now know who her real father is. A gasp. A glass toppled. I stood, straightened my jacket, and whispered, Happy anniversary. I didn't wait for screams. I didn't wait for begging. To the door and left that entire life behind. Outside the air was cold, but not colder than what I'd escaped. I checked my phone. One new message. Divorce finalized. Custody terminated. Assets secured. I smiled. And I drove into the silence, into freedom. Into the life of a man no one would ever play again. The city lights blurred against the windshield as I drove. Not fast, not erratic. Just steady, like a man on a mission with no destination but peace. It was strange how quickly silence could become a companion. After years of being surrounded by noise that never meant anything, the laughter, the fake warmth, the carefully staged family dinners where everyone smiled too wide and drank too much, known. Of it real, I drove past the places where we used to go, restaurants that once hosted our anniversaries, parks where we staged those perfect Sunday walks, smiling for photos that were posted online to prove we were happy. But all of it had been curated, manufactured like a TV show, with bad writers and worse actors. And now that the show had been canceled, all that remained was the backstage debris. My phone buzzed again. A message from her. Just one word. Why? I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have the words, but because I had too many. Why did I give you everything? Why did I believe you when my instincts screamed otherwise? Why did I stay after the first red flag, then the second, then the whole carnival of them? No, silence was my answer, my final gift to her, a mirror she'd have to stare into without my help. That night I didn't go home. I went to a hotel on the other side of town, the kind of place with long hallways and no questions. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, playing back every moment from the past decade like reels of a documentary I didn't know I was the subject of. The little things hurt the most. The mornings she'd kiss my cheek, but never my lips. Birthdays she always forgot until I reminded her. The way she introduced me at parties as the provider, never my husband. The memories once wrapped in love now stank of manipulation. And her sister, that was a deeper cut. Because betrayal from a lover you can rationalize. But betrayal that comes from someone you welcomed into your home, someone who called you family, Who watched your child grow up under your roof? That kind of betrayal isn't sharp, it's slow poison. But in that room, something inside me didn't break. It reformed. I realized that while they had been building their web, I had been building something stronger, the ability to let go. Over the next few days, I set fire to the remains of the life I no longer wanted. I called my lawyer. I rewrote my will. I contacted the banks, the insurance companies, even the school board. Custody wasn't a fight because she didn't want to be a mother, not really. Our daughter, innocent in all of this, would be raised by someone who chose her every single day. The courts agreed. Her biological father, some faceless name still hiding in the shadows, would have to live with knowing he'd fathered a child he never had the courage to claim. I moved out of the house, left it to her, let her decorate her prison however she liked. I didn't take the car, the furniture, not even the wedding ring. Let her have the props to keep up appearances. I wanted freedom, and freedom travels light. But even as I carved out this new space for myself, she tried to pull me back in. The texts started pouring in after the USB, not just from her, but from her parents, her sister, even mutual friends who thought they had some right to speak on the subject. Some tried to guilt me. You didn't have to go that far. They said others begged for mercy. She made a mistake. But what they failed to grasp was that this wasn't about a mistake. This was about erasure. About waking up every day beside someone who wasn't just lying to you but editing your reality. Day after day, smile after smile. I changed my number, closed the chapter. But she wasn't done. She showed up at my office one afternoon, dressed in the same red she always wore when she wanted to disarm me. But I wasn't the same man. She stood there, in the lobby, asking to speak privately. 5 minutes, she pleaded. Not for us for closure, I gave her 4. Sat in a small conference room, her hands folded, her eyes moist in that performative way she had mastered. I never meant to hurt you, she said. I didn't plan for this to happen. I watched her closely. You didn't plan to lie? To use me? To raise a child with me while knowing she wasn't mine? Her silence answered every question. Then came the line I knew was coming. I loved you in my own way. I laughed. Actually laughed. And it felt real for the first time in months. That's the saddest part, I said, because I don't think you even know what love is. I left her sitting there, her crocodile tears dripping into a handbag worth more than most people's rent. And that was the last time I saw her. But her sister wasn't so quick to disappear. She tried to message me. 2 apologies wrapped in flirtation, as though she thought she still had a chance to rewrite the ending. I blocked her without response. The damage was nuclear, and I had no interest in salvaging fallout. Weeks passed. The world didn't end. The sun kept rising. And slowly, I began to rebuild not just my life, but my belief in it. I started running again, joined a gym, enrolled in a cooking class just because I could. I spent time with my daughter, not biologically mine, but in every way that mattered. We made pancakes, we danced in the living room. She never asked why. Her mom was gone. Maybe she knew. Kids always know. One day, years later, when she asks, I'll tell her the truth. But for now, she just needed to know she was loved. Unconditionally. One evening, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, the skyline stretching ahead like a painting I finally had a place in. And I realized something that hadn't hit me before. I wasn't broken. I had been tested, bent, betrayed, but not broken. Because there's a quiet kind of strength that rises in the aftermath. The strength of a man who has looked hell in the eye and walked out with his soul intact. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a fool. I was free. And freedom, I learned, is the most expensive gift you'll ever give yourself. Freedom didn't come with fireworks, it came in the form of slow mornings. Untouched coffee cups cooling beside me while I listened to the world breathe. I started noticing things again. The rustle of trees. The uneven rhythm of a passing train. The warmth of sunlight filtering through cracked blinds. These were the things I had missed while living in a home built on deception. And in that stillness, I began to reclaim myself not as a reaction to betrayal, but as a man forging something whole from the fractured pieces. I met people, real ones this time. Conversations that didn't feel like chess games. I learned how to sit in silence without the weight of unsaid truths hanging in the air. I spent weekends volunteering at a shelter, not for redemption, but because giving without expectation became the only language that made sense. The lawyer sent over the final paperwork, divorce finalized. Her last name changed, custody cemented. She tried to contest it last minute, tried to weaponize emotion in front of the judge, but the evidence I'd provided had its own voice. It spoke louder than her tears ever could. Her sister disappeared after the fallout. Moved cities, I heard. Good. Let her carry her shame like a second skin. Her parents, they tried to reconnect, sent a Christmas card that I'd burned without opening. I wasn't bitter, I was done. My daughter asked one night, in the quiet before sleep, "Daddy, why doesn't Mommy call anymore?" I paused, kissed her forehead, and said, "Because sometimes, when people lie too much, they forget how to tell the truth." She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe she'd always sensed it, the way children do, with instincts, sharper than logic. As the months turned into a year, and then two, the pain dulled.
Not because time heals time.
Doesn't heal anything, it just teaches you how to carry it better.
All the scars don't disappear.
Lessons you survived. I published a memoir, anonymously, under a pseudonym. It wasn't for fame or sympathy. It was a purge. A controlled burn of everything I couldn't say out loud to the people who had wronged me. The book sold modestly. The reviews were kind, but I didn't care about numbers. I cared about telling the truth because when the world you live in is built on lies, truth becomes a rebellion. One afternoon, years after the USB and the dinner and the bomb that didn't explode but imploded quietly, I received an email. No subject line, no name, just one line. "I'm sorry." I deleted it. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer needed that apology. Forgiveness isn't something you give someone to free them. It's what you give yourself to stop bleeding from a wound they've already forgotten. I began dating again, slowly, cautiously, not with fear, but with awareness. The first woman I had dinner with laughed easily, listened more than she spoke. She didn't ask me about my past, and I didn't offer it. That came later when the time was right. We took walks instead of vacations, shared quiet instead of noise. There were no red dresses, no locked phones. Just two people figuring out if healing could have a second chapter. And it could. Love, I learned, is not blind, it's clear-eyed. It sees everything and chooses to stay. But only when it's real. She met my daughter after 6 months. They clicked instantly, like puzzle pieces from different boxes that somehow still fit. I watched them bake cookies one Saturday, flour on their faces. Laughter filling the kitchen I once thought would never feel like home again. And in that moment, something settled in me, not peace, but something better, certainty. I was no longer waiting for the other shoe to drop. There were no more shoes. Just solid ground. I never spoke to my ex-wife again. She sent letters occasionally. I never opened them. I kept them, sealed in a box in storage, not out of spite, but because sometimes closure isn't a conversation. It's a choice. Decision to move forward without needing the other person to understand. My daughter grew older, smarter, stronger. She asked more questions. I answered what I could, and told her one day, when she was ready, I'd tell her. The rest. She nodded, wise beyond her years. Her real father never appeared. Maybe he was too ashamed. Maybe he didn't care. Either way, she never needed him. She had me. One day I took her to the same restaurant from that night, the $200,000 night. It had changed names, new decor. We sat in a booth by the window, ordered ice cream sundaes, and I smiled when she laughed. Real laughter. No pretense. No wait. Just joy. I didn't tell her the story that night, but I looked at the table where it all ended and silently thanked that moment, because that night didn't ruin me. It rebuilt me. That dinner, that bill, that smirk from her sister was the final storm before the calm. And now, here I was. Not a victim, not even a survivor, but a man who had walked through fire and come out not unscathed, but refined. I understood then that revenge was never the point. It was truth, and truth had set me free. It's not in dramatic declarations or courtroom wins, but in the quiet evenings. It's the unbroken routines, the simple act of waking up without dread. In this life, you don't always get justice, but if you're lucky, you get clarity. And clarity, I found, is rarer than justice, and infinitely more valuable. Years passed like whispered confessions, low and unnoticed, until suddenly everything had changed, and I was standing in a life I'd once only hoped was possible. The woman who now stood beside me wasn't a replacement sheet, was a revelation. It's not a fix for what had broken me, but a reminder that I had rebuilt myself. We married quietly, a small ceremony by a lake. No grand declarations or lavish displays, just vows spoken with trembling honesty under a sky that finally felt honest too. My daughter wore a simple dress, held my hand during the vows, and when I said I do, wasn't just marrying a woman, I was declaring to the world that I hadn't been defeated. And yet, sometimes, the ghosts whispered. In the hush of midnight, I'd remember the look on my ex-wife's face when the truth was laid bare. The way her sister froze, the silence that followed like a vacuum sucking the air from the room. But I let those memories pass, like rain on glass, sliding away with time. Never sought to erase the past, only to live in spite of it, and living became my resistance. The career I'd once neglected began to thrive again. I started mentoring younger colleagues, sharing not just business wisdom but life lessons disguised as anecdotes. I never told them the full story, only hinted at it in the pauses between words. Some knew, most didn't, but the lessons landed just the same. I invested in things that mattered: education, shelters, places where betrayal wasn't just emotional, but systemic. Because healing had taught me that empathy wasn't weakness, it was armor. And one day in a bookstore I liked to visit on Sundays, I saw a familiar face. Her, the sister. She looked older, thinner, like someone who had been carrying her guilt like a coffin on her back. She saw me, froze, and I, for a moment, stood still. Then I nodded. Just once. Not in forgiveness. Not in hated, just acknowledgement. She didn't approach. Didn't speak. Just turned and left. I watched her go and felt nothing. Not victory, not satisfaction. Just peace. True peace doesn't come when your enemies fall. It comes when you no longer care if they stand. My daughter, now a teenager, found the box, one Datha, sealed letters from her biological mother. She brought them to me, eyes questioning but not accusing. Should I read them? She asked. I thought for a long time. Then I said, only if you want to. But no, this truth isn't just what's written in a letter. It's what you live. Every day, she nodded, placed the box back, unopened. She had already chosen her truth, watched her walk away and realized she was stronger than I ever was at her age, and that was enough. That night, my wife and I sat on the porch, whined. Glasses untouched, hands entwined. Do you think, she asked softly, that everything we went through was worth this? I didn't answer right away. I looked at the stars, thought of the lies, the betrayal, the cost. Then I looked at her. Yes, I said. Because if I hadn't been broken, I wouldn't know how to be whole. She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. Not from sadness, but recognition. And as the wind rustled the trees and the night deepened, I realized I had no more words left for the past. Only space for the future. Not a perfect future, but an honest one. One where every scar had a story, and every story ended not in bitterness, but in becoming. So if you ask me who I am now, I'd say I'm not the man who was betrayed. Not. The one who exposed the lie, not even the one who walked away from the table without paying the bill. I am the man who stayed silent when silence was power, who spoke when truth was a weapon, who walked when staying would have been surrender. I am the man they never expected to survive. And in that survival, I found something better than revenge. I found myself